Loudon, and I am the Sidell Sonkin and Herb Siegel Artistic Director of Chautauqua Visual Arts. And I'm so excited to be with all of you tonight. This is our second of 9 lectures that we have in our Chautauqua Visual Arts lecture series, the CVA lecture series. And tonight we have a wonderful artist named Salvador Jimenez-Flores. He's currently residing in Chicago. And Salvador works in a lot of different media, but one of the central media that he works in is in ceramics, use of clay. And speaking of ceramics, I just wanted to share with you while we have this moment that we have awesome ceramics enrichment classes to offer. So anyone who's interested in wanting to play around with clay, even online, we can do this with you. You get this one-on-one attention with many of our expert faculty who could really guide you through and also create, a great fun experience. I got too excited with the camera there. Anyway, so Salvador Jimenez-Flores, I'm going to share with you a little bit about him from his biography. So Salvador is an interdisciplinary artist born in Mexico. He's raised in Mexico. He explores the politics of identity and the state of double consciousness. He addresses issues of colonization, migration, quote, the other, and futurism by producing a mixture of socially conscious installation, public and studio-based art. His work spans from drawing and, as I said, ceramics, prints, and mixed media sculpture. Salvador has presented his work all over the world, including the National Museum of Mexican Art, the Grand Rapids Art Museum, the Urban Institute of Contemporary Art, Bemis Center of Contemporary Arts, and the Museum of Art and Design in New York City, among many others. He has served as an artist in residence for the City of Boston, the Harvard Ceramics Program, the Office of the Arts of Harvard University, and Kohler Arts Industry. Salvador is a recipient of the Joe Mitchell Foundation, where he received a Joe Mitchell Foundation Painters and Sculptors Grant, and the New England Foundation for the Arts. He's currently an assistant professor in ceramics at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And just on a personal note, I met Salvador because I was helping grantees or giving advice for grantees of the Joe Mitchell Foundation grant. And we met that way, and then we stayed in touch. And then he invited me to come to Chicago, and we kept the rapport going. And in the spirit of cultural reciprocity, but also knowing that he really, really magnifies and reflects our mission of Chautauqua, where he's sharing in a light of eminence, in a place of giving voice to others, in a place of social gospel, if you will, and what our founders have always connected Chautauqua to in their mission, which is a place of giving, learning, and sharing. So without further ado, here is Salvador Jimenez-Flores, and I will be back with you to be able to host a conversation and take your many questions after his presentation. Have a great time. Salvador?
Hello.
Hello there. I'm going to let you go here and have a great time, and I'll see you soon. Okay?
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone. This is going to be interesting because I don't see that many people. I usually, whenever I give a lecture, ideally I would like to see the people so I can get a reaction and kind of like buy from their energy and present to that audience. But I guess I'll just go ahead and do it this way. So I guess in connection to what Sharon just mentioned, the way I met Sharon was actually through her writing. When I moved to Boston to do that residency at the Harvard Ceramics Program, a former professor gave me one of her books, the Living and Sustaining a Creative Life. And it was 40 essays by different artists. So I highly recommend it. I think for me, that was an eye-opening experience, just to think about all the different ways that one can make it in the art world and sustain your practice. And there's no right answer, but rather there's just a mixture of things. So currently I'm assistant professor at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and I teach ceramics there. And these are some of the links to some of the organizations. I will talk a little bit today about Instituto Gráfico de Chicago, which I'm a member for that, as well as the Color Network. So if you're really interested in ceramics, the Color Network, it's what it sounds like. It's just a network of colorful people working with clay. And the first slides is just gonna give you a little bit of history of, where I come from and how I got to Chicago and then came back to Chicago, and the relationship of my family with the Midwest. So I was born and raised in Jamay, Jalisco, Mexico, and there, I feel like my work has to do with certain political events that happen, or treaties that happen that kind of like connect my family with the States. The first instance was when my great-grandfather was part of the Traqueros program, which is the Mexican railroad workers came to the States, especially in the Midwest, and work on developing those tracks. And I found out this information a few months back when I was visiting it's more like a year back, visiting my family, and my aunt shared this picture of my great-grandfather. So I decided to make a lithography out of this, as kind of like paying tribute to his labor and contributions to the Midwest. But also, one of the notes that my aunt told me about this picture, it's a picture that I turned into a print, that this was the first time that my great-grandfather wore like a closed shoes. He was used to wearing sandals all the time, huaraches, if you know those. So he was very proud of wearing these boots that he needed for work, and this chair also kind of like gave him this really nice statue. So I just thought that I wanted to capture that bit of history. The second time that there's a relationship with my family in the States was when my dad was part of the Bracero program that was, lasted from 1942 to 1964. And essentially that allowed Mexican nationals to come to the States, work for a few months, and then they will come back to their families. And then so my dad, when he did that, he ended up moving to Chicago to find more stability with his job. And then eventually in '83, he decided to move back to Mexico. And by that time, he had already purchased some land and a house with the money that he had saved up. And he started farming in Mexico. So the third event that happened was the North America Free Trade Agreement. And that affected my dad's economy, because he was a farmer. That really affected us economically. And even though we're still getting by just fine, he decided that in order for us to have a better future, he would come back to the States. We are privileged and lucky that my dad throughout this process became a U.S. citizen, and my mom was a resident, so all of us were able to come to the States without many struggles. So there's this picture that kind of like explain a little bit of the complexity of what does it mean to be a Mexican national living in the United States, and the history that exists within that, and all the complexities, right? And I think one of the important things to acknowledge is that we're still sitting or listening, in your cases, on this stolen land, and it's something that we have to acknowledge. you know, that this is a stolen land, and we have to try to find better ways of working together and continue to welcome new generations of immigrants to be part of this country, and start working together rather than creating a division among us. And there's a funny saying in Mexico, like "Pobre México, tan lejos de Dios y tan cerca de los Estados Unidos." You know, it translates to "Poor Mexico, so far from God and so close to the United States." Because I feel like in so many ways it's a blessing and a curse to be so close to this, for Mexico to be so close to the United States. And what I want to talk to you all about today, it's this kind of intersection that happens with the artist, the citizen, and the educator. And it took me a while to connect the three of them. I would always look at them as wearing three different hats and switching from one to the other when I was working in all these projects, until I decided that they they all fall into the same category. So the artist, I feel like as an artist, I have the responsibility to use my craft to address issues that affect my community, create awareness, and propose actions through my art. So this is something that I remember from the beginning when I decided to become an artist, that I really wanted to do that. I wanted to tell a story. I wanted to create these narratives, and especially try to create visibility to the invisible citizens or workers that usually don't get their resources or the proper pay or working conditions. And during this time, this is after I finished my undergrad in graphic design, and that's when I started getting more interested in installations and also just making more fine art. And I think for me, it was important, just the idea of working with materials and playing around with different materials, and also adding the histories of these materials to work with the content and concept that I was trying to portray. This one is titled "Disposable Citizen," and it's speaking to all the work that a lot of documented and undocumented migrants do, and a lot of the times it's not compensated, and there's a lot of injuries that happen in those workplaces, and they're still also not getting like the correct compensation that they need. So before that, I ended up so let me just backtrack a little bit. So I came here to the States in 2000, not knowing English, not understanding the school system or how things work here. And for me, that was a huge transition. And in high school, when I was, I ended up joining an after-school program in high school that showed us the skill on how to use the camera in the darkroom. And to me, that was a great coping mechanism to start telling like my story and capture all the emotions that I was dealing with during that time. And after that, I didn't know where I wanted to study or what I wanted to do. So I ended up going to a community college, and that's where I started reading W.B. Du Bois, and especially this book, The Souls of Black Folk, really opened my eyes to this feeling that I had, this idea of the double consciousness that I was feeling, not only conscious about myself, but also how I was being seen by the dominant culture. And that really made me think about, what kind of career I wanted to take. And I chose graphic design because I still wanted to be creative, but I also wanted to make a living out of it. And part of it was because I wanted to pay tribute for all the sacrifices that my parents did to come to the States. Like, I didn't want to say like, oh, I just want to do art. because they had all these ideas that, you know, artists usually don't make a living out of it, or it's a really difficult career. So I started graphic design as a way of sustaining my creative practice, but also learn new skills and continue with that. So I did that for a while as a graphic designer, and I started teaching in after school programs, those same programs that I came out of. And I just wanted to show you a little bit of the grad school work that I did. This when I was interested in capturing all these historical events through drawing and try to take these events as a revisionist history from my own perspective. I was in a drawing program in grad school, and I was interested in a lot of experimentation. But at the same time, I took a ceramic class as an elective, and I was kind of like flirting with the material for a little bit. But since I was still in drawing as my main media focus, I was doing this type of drawings. And from there, you know, I just realized that I couldn't capture the complexity of history with these drawings, and it was really difficult to also create work that I was getting the proper feedback. Throughout my entire education, undergrad and grad students, I never had a Latinx professor or someone that's shared the similar experience to me. So it was hard to present this type of work and getting the proper feedback during critiques, because a lot of the times, you know, people would just freeze when they had to take, or faculty members, when they were trying to talk about identity, they would not address the concept or the root of the work that was produced, but they would just focus more on the aesthetics and the fundamentals of art. And we were getting a lot of feedback on that, but not so much in the content. So that really pushed me to starting to explore other things with clay. And after a while, I decided that, you know, clay was really material that I was able to tell a lot of the stories that I wanted to do, and it allowed me to make it a little bit more personal. So instead of trying to say a lot of things in one piece, clay really allowed me to say many things with many pieces, by making it more personal, and also try to capture a little bit more of the humanness that happens among us. And this ended up being my thesis show, titled "I'm Not Who You Think I Am." And during this time, I mean, I probably felt like this when I was in grad school, like just reading and dealing with all the work that I was trying to achieve, and that's a good depiction of it. One of the things that I was interested in with this body of work is the idea of text and translations and mistranslations. So I was interested in giving the audience that knows Spanish a little extra reward, that if they read the title and look at the piece, they get a little a smirk or laugh, because of some of the mistranslations that were on purpose, or just some of the phrases that were put in as the titles. The second thing that I was interested in doing with this body of work, and you can see here, was a way of claiming space. This was at the Grand Rapids Art Museum, and I wanted to just stain those white walls with this beautiful terracotta slip, and I did that all around the museum. And part of it was like creating, try to make a space where these pieces felt like they belong, and part of it was sustaining those white walls and claiming space as you know, brown artists to try to ask for more inclusion in some of these institutions, and also in the permanent collection. And the Grand Rapids Art Museum ended up purchasing 3 of these pieces for their permanent collection. So in that sense, I guess it was kind of effective. So this one was title is "Tengo changos en la cara o qué?" like what are you looking at? But this is something that I have experienced as a brown person. When I go to a place where the dominant culture is mainly white, sometimes people just stare at me like they've never seen a Latinx person before. And this actually happened in Michigan once. So I ended up making a piece about this. I'm just gonna go through this. These are too many pieces, but I was interested in creating a timeless timeline of events and kind of like phrases and serious stuff, but also funny stuff. So this is the idea of the dark-skinned Madonna, La Virgen de Guadalupe, and just the idea of religion and how that in so many ways is what has oppressed many countries, and especially in Mexico, is this idea of Catholicism being part of the culture to a point that even if you're not Catholic, you're culturally Catholic just because everything is around Catholicism. This was another piece that was trying to address my permanent legal alien card that I used to have as a green card holder. I just saw that the title and the labeling of that ID was problematic in many ways, and I created this piece as a way of making fun of it, but also kind of like addressing this labeling system that the U.S. is so used to impose on people, or that makes people feel more comfortable or less fearful once you put a label on things. And I think this body of work was about that. Like, how can I deal with all these stereotypes and labels that are assigned to my group, my ethnic group, and kind of like put them in an art piece and see how people react to it. And also as a way of, digging deeper within my own self and having a better sense of identity or questioning that, like, what does it mean to be a national Mexican living in the United States, but I'm also a U.S. citizen, and also this in between of living in these two worlds. And this piece kind of like shows a little bit of that, but also the idea of the double consciousness. And this is also addressing like some historical references of riots or wars, and also the idea of assimilating to a white bread West Michigan, where I lived for 3 years. That it was a shocking, it was a little bit of a shock coming from Chicago to Michigan, and the cultural shift was significant to the work and to me as a person. So once again, thinking about heroes and villains and just try to deface them in a different way, or try to play with the idea of the portrait and the body. This is something similar that you saw on the drawings before, but I was trying to do that sculpturally. And also the idea of colorism and how that happens worldwide, and also especially in Mexico. All the moms and aunts, when someone is born and they're light skinned, they're like, oh, mira, salió güerito, and this idea of colorism and thinking that light skin is better or is preferred. So I made this piece title, I see muy europeo, like this idea of like being too European. And also some like phrases like just this actually is the wrong title. I need to update this. So this is picante pero sabroso. So thinking about some songs that I like and phrases. And one of the great things about this body of work, as I was learning more about ceramics, and I was able to experiment with so many firing processes and glazes or stains and underglazes, and it was great, like to just experiment. And then as I was reacting to the material and give it a title, and then it became like this conversation with the piece back and forth until it was finalized. And this is kind of like the conclusion of this body of work, you know, like coming to the point that I am who I am, and just embracing that idea, like my skin is brown and it's beautiful, and you know, and I'm gonna be under this skin for many more years, so why not just embrace it and take it as it is. So the idea of a acceptance was important for that body of work. And then this other body of work was during my residency at the Harvard Ceramics program, and it was with the idea of like no one discovered the Americas. So I was interested in creating this self-portraits that capture like this ghost-like, almost hunting kind of approach. And once again, playing with the space, bringing some of my graphic design background and installation, and try to take over the space. This image that you see of kind of like with the hands up on the window, it was just a slip on the window, and I just wanted to create more of an environment for this body of work. And then that led to creating this the older body of work that I've been researching and working on for several years. It started with this piece, La Resistencia de los Nopales Híbridos, the resistance of the hybrid cacti. And then with this, I was interested in creating this, what I call Rasquache Futurism, which is like a springboard of Afrofuturism and Rasquache art, or Rasquache aesthetic. As in other words, like making do with what's available, and this idea of assemblages and things like that. And this piece also pushed me in a different way of working. I had a very small studio when I was making this piece, but I wanted to work in a larger scale. So all these pieces kind of like come apart through different installation mechanisms, and like pinning, posting, and stacking. And so it just really opened up a whole different way of possibilities for me in the way I was working. And I was interested in the idea of the cactus, and how cacti can survive in almost any weather or environment, and they're very adaptable. And I would say I was interested in that relationship with me, or with immigrants, or just with people, how they tend to adapt to any circumstances. And this also was tapping to the idea of resistance. I mean, this was right after Trump was elected president of the United States. So there was this sense of resiliency and this idea of indigenous people and Black and brown, like we have been resisting all this oppression for many years, and like we're still dealing with it, and we're still fighting, and the fight keeps going, you know. And right now we're in the middle of a movement that we're still pushing and try to better our living conditions in the States. So for this, I was also interested in the idea of science fiction, and how a lot of the heroes, they don't really look like me. They don't represent me. They're usually white, and I was interested in creating, like, I started developing like this idea of creating my own heroes that look like me and that are more relatable to me and other people of color. And then this is just a close-up of that same piece. And then this eagles, I was interested in the ideology of how the eagle is used in the American emblem, but also how it's also the brown eagle is used in the Mexican emblem, and just this big symbol of power and the idea of snakes in the Mexican emblem, and I would just try to embrace this idea of being both the eagle and the snake, and a lot of people think of snakes as something bad, but the way I look at snakes is like they have the wisdom of the ground, in a way. So I was interested in creating these eagles, make them look like superheroes that have mustache like me, and they look more like brown or Mexican if you want it to be. Why not? And once again, you can see the different angles for this piece. And for this, I was also inspired by Robert Arneson's work, like all the ceramic cell portraits that he did in that era of funk ceramics, like 60s and just I think like the 60s and 68 aesthetic. It was one that I'm kind of like interested in, and also all the political movements that were happening during that time. I think that also informed all the art and music that was happening. So this eagle is, it has become like this body of work where it's just like reappropriating this American federal eagle and kind of like injecting different portraits or different forms of seeing it and giving it a different meaning, or this idea of thinking about the dark side of the Americas, that never left us. It's always there, and now more than ever, we see it more on the spotlight. And I mean, we have our president like defending and promoting this division and this separation, and also this idea of the requiem, the requiem, like this idea that everything that falls, everything that goes up at some point falls and gets destroyed, and hopefully that's for the betterment of society. So I was interested in trying to capture that. What else? And this is just an example of how like I made this small piece when I was doing some research at the Peabody Museum that is part of the Harvard Ceramics program, and it was just like as a test for a class, as a demonstration. But then when I was asked to be part of this exhibition that animals as vessels and how they've been used throughout history. And this is when I moved to Chicago and I didn't have access to a ceramic studio, and I had this deadline for this exhibition. And I just kind of like worked with what I had, and I came out with this this piece, and it was a direct response of some of the statements that Donald Trump made about Mexicans. And it was just the idea of reappropriating this calf hide and just giving it a different context. And then last summer, I had the opportunity to go to John Mitchell Collier Art Center and spend some time at the factory during this residency. So these are just some of the shots from that studio. I came to this residency not knowing anything about foundry. I applied for this residency like four times. And before I was interested in doing pottery, and the last time I just checked both options, pottery or foundry. Like I just really wanted to get this residency, and I was very persistent, and I changed my application every time, and I asked for feedback. So for all of you guys who are students or are out in the world applying for things, part of it is just applying. That already gives you an option to be admitted to this, but also it exposes your art to so many jurors who are behind the scenes that down the road they might recommend you for something, or something can come out of that. So this was a really fun residency, but it was also a lot of work. Right now in Chicago, we have like 90 degrees in temperature. There is probably 10 degrees hotter inside the factory. So at some point I was just so tired. I just wanted to be in the apartment, but I just knew that this was like a unique opportunity and I wanted to maximize my time there. So these are some of the work that I created there. This is called American Dream. So I think it was around like July 4th actually. And there was, I went to a thrift store and they had all this molds. I think this was a mold for like yellow or something. And then I just kind of like took it and made a casting out of wax and then turned this into a piece with snakes that kind of like represents a little bit more of this contradictions that happen or the struggles that happen with being in the United States and being brown, being a person of color. And so I created this other piece based on a book by Galeano, The Open Veins of Latin America. And I highly recommend that book if you're interested in some like really good journalism and history of the Americas. And once again, kind of like playing with the idea of the Eagles, bringing that back a little bit. This piece, I changed the title. I think I changed it to Yesterday. With this division, like race division. And I was interested in this this circular round platform as a way as looking at them as portals, like they're portals to something. So this one is a little bit more of a Latinx hero type of scenario. And this was cast iron and this is bronze and cast iron. And then one of the great things about color too, they really let you use some of the, or take some of the pieces that didn't make it through the quality check, and then you can reappropriate them and use them in a different way. And this is a piece about Monsanto and genetically modified seeds. And these are some of the pieces that that I did, but I'm still working in reactivating them with other materials. And this was probably the piece that I was the most proud that I was able to realize there completely. So once again, it's bringing that hybrid tactile idea and the idea of futurism into these pieces. And metal really opened up a different way of working, and I don't have facilities to do that, but I'm interested in maybe tapping into that at some point. Sharon, if there's if I'm running out of time or anything, just send me a message on the group. Otherwise, I will continue. So the other aspect is the citizen. You know, as a citizen, I believe that social change starts within oneself, and that it takes community and relationships to manifest the change that we want to see. Together, we can create a more equitable and just society. Once again, you know, I think it's, you know, it seems so simple and repetitive, but I feel like as citizen, we have responsibility, right? Like every single act that we do as citizens affects other people or families or communities. And there is something about change, right? Like you can't just you can't really impose change on people. It really starts within oneself. And then with the people that we're close to, and then it creates just like this domino effect of creating change within that community. And this is some of the some images of the group, the Instituto Gráfico de Chicago, which is just a few friends that we wanted to continue with the legacy of printmaking, and just as a media of creating social consciousness and spreading ideas fast and widely. And we were interested on keeping with this tradition of printmaking. So it's just a friend of ours we just got together and created this group, and we just wanted to make print portfolio exchanges. So these are some images from those print portfolio exchanges. If you don't know how those works, essentially it's like 35 artists get invited to do a print. You make an edition of 35 or sometimes a few more, maybe 37, and everyone gets a print. And then there's 2 extra portfolios that can be sold or sent to exhibit in different places. So these are some of the images that I've done with that group. And of course, all of them are with the idea of creating social justice and or advocating for it. This is before Oscar Lopez Rivera was pardoned by Obama. And this is just right after the elections. It was this idea of a desperate cry. and this is titled La Danza de la Serpiente, the dance of the serpent, and just this idea of looking at the different ways that we all migrate and thinking about by foot, by railroad, by water, by desert, by air, and then the fence or the idea of the wall, like this. I mean, if I can say idiotic idea that a wall is gonna stop migration. And some of the other things that we do as a group is we put this free pre-making festival where we invite different pre-makers from Chicago to join us and share one of their techniques to the audience for them to do, and we let them sell their prints. So they generate a revenue, but at the same time they're sharing a technique with the audience. So the beautiful thing about this event, we just get kids, seniors and adults and all ages, and it becomes bigger and bigger every year. This year, I don't know how we're gonna do it with the pandemic. We're already thinking of maybe creating like an online platform for this, so stay tuned for that. And the other group is the Color Network. The Color Network is this small organization that was started out of need, really. The ceramic world in the United States it's very homogenic, and especially the major ceramic conference that it's called in Sika. I remember the first time that I went, and I just didn't see myself represented. I was like, oh, this is not for me. But I kept going, and then a few years back, we had a gathering like where we just reserved a room, and it was like any, person of color who is working with clay and is interested in meeting other folks, come to this room. And then this is just a handful of the people that showed up that day. And then a year later, some other friends that are also in the picture here, Natalia, Arbeláez, April, Felipe, Jinka, and Adam. I don't think Adam is there. But anyways, we decided to just create a group. And part of it was out of frustration that we didn't see ourselves represented in a lot of the slides that were given by instructors, or people will reach out like, but there's no, African-American artists that work with clay or Latinx, or there's very few, or there's always the same names that, that come up. So we started with this idea, let's just create a website that has a database, and we just share more names of people of color that work with clay. And now our Instagram, it's just filled with, colorful creatives from all over the world. And we create this as a way of creating visibility for this artists of colors that a lot of people say like we don't exist, but yes, we do, and we've been doing the work for years. And we have gotten a lot of feedback from educators that they really are grateful for this platform and this database, because they can now diversify their artist lives a little bit more. So we're having a good momentum with this organization. We're growing little by little, and this is all volunteer work. This is all things that we do out of heart and out of need, and it's also as a way of giving back. Like when I was a student, I wish I could have seen some of these platforms or some of this database to really have a more holistic education. Can you guys still see me? My computer was acting weird. I'll just continue. What else? And then, that taps to this idea of the educator. As an educator, I want to impact the lives of my students in a positive way and inspire new generations of artists to continue guiding forthcoming generations, creating an unbroken chain of shared knowledge. And to me, that's important. And I think this was the first time that I got an opportunity to co-teach. I was co-teaching this mural class with my friend and mentor, Ricardo Santos Hernandez. And he was the one who really got me into the idea of teaching. I never thought that I would get into teaching or anything like that. They called me if I was interested in participating in this as a co-instructor, and I was like, yes. And I mean, to be honest, I felt like he was doing more of the teaching and I was just observing. And I learned a lot from Ricardo, and I think the level of quality that he expected from the students and the way he would connect with students, I just really liked, and that really resonated with me. And I feel like that's where I got a lot of my teaching approach from him, like just observing him interact with the students and having high expectations of the students. With this project, we ended up having video, audio, three-dimensional components that were coming out, and all of that happened just with the idea of also sharing what we know, sharing our knowledge with these teenagers and these young artists that just did fantastic. And then after that, I was asked again to lead another mural project at a hospital, but this time was by myself. So it was a big challenge, and especially like before this, I never managed a group of people or anything, but I just took it very seriously, and I did my best. I just did the best that I could, and this is the result of that work. What I'm interested about this type of education is a project-based learning education where we're working with the youth. Some that sign up exactly because they wanted to paint, some because they just needed to do something that summer and they happened to join that class. So we're not only teaching them like principles of art and design and how to do some technical work, but also the idea of how to be a team player, how to be on time for a job, creating that responsibility and accountability to be part of something bigger, right? Like this idea of a public art, in essence, is that, it's kind of like facilitating skills to create a piece of work for the public. And I feel like once it's done and finished, it doesn't really belong to the artists or the creators, but rather it belongs to the people. And during this time, I was working for a community development association, and they had a lot of this approach, this holistic approach of working with the people, working with what's available there, seeing what are the dreams and hopes of that community and creating something out of it. And that's kind of like the way I approach community art or public art. This idea of just utilizing the resources that are there, working with the people there, and especially living within that community, you understand better what they're going through. And it just kind of like creates this beautiful group of people working towards one final goal and goal. And I think the idea of deadlines really helped. This project was started with younger artists creating the concept, and then with some older students executing the mosaic mural. During this time, I never worked with clay before. They gave me all this big budget to manage and create this work, and never done mosaic before. And when they asked me, "You want to do this mosaic mural?" and I was like, "Well, I've never done that before." And if and but then the director at that time, Gabriel Villa, is like, "Well, I can put you in contact with someone who knows how to do it." So I was literally learning a week before the students how to do this, and this is the first time that I worked with clay, and I also had a friend who had a kiln and was able to fire this for me. But I learned a lot, a lot of mistakes that everyone makes with clay. Like it shrinks, and it shrinks like about 10 to 12% or more, and that changed the placement of the piece. And anyways, it was this idea of really taking projects that are beyond your current ability. And the way I see it is that that's the only way that I was able to grow as an artist. And that's why I'm always tapping into projects that might seem a little bit bigger than what I can handle, but at the end I end up learning a lot. So this is another public mural that we created through your Locali Arts Reach. This is a combination of high school students and some college students. A fun fact about this this mural is like when I got up there at the scaffolding, I think I realized that I was afraid of heights, or I had some sort of like vertigo effect. But it was too late because I was already working on this, and I just kind of had to power through it and face that fear and deal with it. But I was really proud of the work that the students created for this project. We were really interested in creating a clear message and saying like our demands, like what we want with this Declaration of Immigration. So once again, I wanted to bring up some of the graphic design component. And then this is during my time in Boston. I was working with Urbano Project, a great organization over there in Boston. And I was working again with the youth, similar to what I was doing in Chicago. And it was just the idea of activating spaces with this mobile sculpture. And we changed it to be several things. It was a gallery at some point. It was data visualization at some point, like this one. And it was also kind of like this idea of creating a nomadic home as well. And then also we took it as a way of creating conversations about gentrification in different areas in Boston. And that led to me doing this project during my residency with the city of Boston. I was located at a school, and I presented the idea for this project and collaborated with them on what we wanted to do. And we utilized printmaking as a way of creating art, and also for them to take some of that art home. And the final product was like this canvas that we collaged the prints from each of the students in there. And it was with this idea that that everyone is welcome there, which this was in Chinatown. And that led to this other project, Tortilla Social, that was funded by the New England Foundation for the Arts. And it was a way of, once again, how can sculpture create or change the environment by just activating it and creating programming around it. So with this, the way I broke it down is like thinking about a social issue and how can we run it through this printing press, which is a tortilla press, but also a print-making press. And how can we utilize art and food as a way of having these hard conversations about these issues that are affecting our community. So this is some still images of all the printing that was done and the dinner and conversation that followed that. In some of these interventions, we also screen printed with mole on the tortilla. So it was like edible ink, if you want to call it like that. And at this point, I'll probably share a video. Chip, can you play that video?
Tortilla Social is a participatory project that transforms public spaces. We use printmaking as a tool for self-expression, art education, and food as uniter of community. It is a mobile project that features a multifunctional tortilla press. We engage participants of all ages in making art, tortillas, and conversations about the needs and wants of the community.
I'm a resident, green card holder. So I came here when I was 7 years old. I was undocumented for most of my life until I got DACA in 2014, and then through DACA I was able to go to college. I don't know, I feel like with art, I'm able to take a piece of Mexico home with me. There's some of the things that are represented today.
This is a collaborative and participatory project that makes art inclusive and accessible to all. The combination of art and food fosters new relationships between community members and the arts. We bring art to the people in places like parks, community centers, and unconventional spaces. By doing so, we reimagine places where art can happen, build spaces for public imagination, and create meaningful civic experiences.
So Tortilla Social essentially is a social sculpture that is tortillera. The premise of this project was to use pre-making and food as cultivators for dialogue about the different social issues that are affecting our community.
All right, so that's a little bit of I guess that will give you a taste of what happened in those events. There's a longer video online that you can find if you just Google Tortilla Social video or something like that. But essentially, one of the things that I was interested with this project that happened beautifully and organically was that I wanted to create art with this sculpture that was accessible, inclusive, and equitable. And to achieve that and sustain this project, which is still going now, the organizations that could provide a stipend for this event will give up money to provide it. But the organizations who couldn't or could only pay a little bit, it was created like this sliding fee that people can pay just what they could to bring this project to those institutions or places. So some of the universities that could pay more money to bring me over with this project subsidize the workshops in libraries or places that didn't have that many funds. And so once again, I wanted to focus today on this idea of, of the artist, the citizen, and the educator, and how they all fit together into this little category. And I think for me, I found that this is important for me to find this intersection. And I'll just read this really quick. In my work, the fusion of these three categories is significant because together they create the synergy that I need to stay hopeful, curious, playful, and take risk. And for me, it took me a while. I felt like before I was always dividing myself into all these different categories, but once I found the connection between all these three, that is this idea of shared knowledge and how can you pass that on to others so they can continue with this work. It was a good realization just to kind of like see it as a one thing project or one activity or one coalition of things. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, so wow, I am dying. I'm so excited. There were so many times I was just blown away. I knew I would be anyway, knowing you. So I just feel incredibly grateful. So before I get started, and forgive me, there's a siren going on. That must be here at Chautauqua. That must be a sign. But essentially, for anyone who wants to participate in this Q&A with Salvador, please be sure to turn your camera on. There's a camera to the right of your name, and just click onto that, and you'll be able to pop on with a question. And then also, I'll be able to look in the chat as well to see if anybody has any questions. So I think now me and Salvador are going to get on the screen together, and we're going to have a little chat while you all are warming up with questions that you have. First of all, I want to say, Salvador, thank you so much. Oh my God. So I just am ecstatic because the kind of things that you're talking about in a lovely way, unapologetic. And somebody in the chat room also said, it's so good that he's so unapologetic. How did you feel? What gave you the strength to be that unapologetic? And then how do you also use that in your powerful position at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think it comes down to the idea of art making, right? Like, I think from the beginning, I decided that I wanted to make art that had a purpose or had this specific statement, whatever that could be, and that it wasn't just gonna be about beautifying something, but it was just the idea of saying what I felt and what I thought it was authentic to me. So I think that's something that I keep as in the back burner for my practice in general. And I think it comes with that, like just being honest with yourself about the work that you make. And if you have to be overt about your work, then it needs to be overt. If you need to make it not as direct, then that's also fine, And I think allowing ourselves as artists to change from one place to the other, I think it's completely okay. And that's, if anything, that's what art, music, and all the arts do, right? It creates this transitional medium to talk about heavy issues through art in a way that makes them a little bit more accessible, and people are willing to participate in that dialogue.
Yes.
And of course, now it also helps that now I have a position that also allows me to advocate for these things as they're happening in the school with so many institutions, including the institutions that I work with, like this systemic racism that has happened throughout years in the history of the place, and many places that we have in place. They're still struggling with that because it was founded under those principles, and it is until we citizens and participants of this institutions start changing those things and advocating for more, once again, like equity, inclusion, and diversity in these places, something that represents more the audience that they're serving.
Yep, that's what we're trying to do at the Chautauqua Visual Arts, as you know. And I think that yourself being in that position, yourself as an artist, you're putting yourself in these positions in order to do that, in order to break that, which I think is extremely powerful. And I'm grateful that you're doing that. Thank you for that work. I have a question here from Mary. Mary, I'm going to put you in here. Is Mary still there by chance? Oh, I think she left. Okay, so we're waiting. Oh, here she is. Hi, Mary. It looks like you're in a lovely place there.
I'm in Chautauqua, and it says Biddleford, and I have no idea what that means. I'm on our second floor porch at Chautauqua, and I want to tell you how much I appreciate your work and what you've done. And I'm so grateful that you had a chance to tell us all about it. And I wondered about opportunities to do more color group kind of activism work in cities beyond Chicago. Do you have apprentices or other people, or are your students going out to do this kind of thing around the country? Because there's no better time than now. This is when we need it.
Yeah, I mean, the Color Network, it's a national organization. We have members from different parts of the country, and that's how we're managed to keep up with that work. And in a way, it doesn't, we're having this conversation that, because we created a series of videos that was asking organizations or institutions more what we need, or, what we would like to see, more representation and so on. But, we didn't, someone a member from the group said that, they never saw themselves as activists by doing that kind of work. And I was like, I don't think that it has to be overt, but just the simple fact that we were putting that website, it was a form of activism, because we took an action on something that we needed, something that we saw that it was needed. And it took just an action of setting up a website and creating more visibility with more visibility for people of color working with clay. So, I think everyone is welcome and can do their part, not just by being an ally, but, becoming an accomplice and take a small action that you can take in your town, in the city that you work with, get a phone call and, call museums or institutions that you want them to do better in their diversity or inclusion or anything. It takes a simple act, just ask yourself a simple question. What's one thing that you can do that will better your community?
But what I loved about this so much is that it had every age group involved. It was a wide community effort. And so right now, with this movement attracting people of every age, every race, every background, and they're wanting to support change, systemic change. And so this is a wonderful way to bring people together through art. I love the idea, and I love what you're doing.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Mary, thank you so much. I have to catch up with you, and I would love to introduce myself and say hello, if you don't mind.
I'd love that. Tell me when, and I'll come down to the gallery and find you.
I will definitely do that. And then Salvador, next year, if we can all meet in person, I'd love for you two to connect. That would just be lovely.
I would love that, because I live in St. Petersburg, and St. Petersburg has an active community of an active, diverse community. And so this is an ideal location to do something with art there. I'd love to take this idea and make this happen.
I'm not going to forget it either. So Mary, I'll be in touch with you. Salvador knows I'm not going to forget. Okay, thank you so much. We have now a question from Rahele, who is one of our esteemed mentors of the Chautauqua Visual Arts. And she's also, I would say you are friends and colleagues. Would you say that? So Rahele, come on board with us. Chip, can you help her to come on video, or you can just give a question? Here she comes. There she is.
Hey, Rahel.
Great. Thank you so much, Salvador, for your amazing, inspiring talk, especially this week. We just started our classes about clay and ceramics at Chautauqua, so it was just a perfect timing, you know. So thank you so much. You maybe answered this question in relation to art in general, you know, but I want to be a little bit specific when it comes to our discipline, our material medium clay. And my question is, you as an artist, educator, and as somebody who engaged in the community work, you're part of an organization, so many organizations, but how do you see the future of our discipline, clay, in relation to the current issues? How do you see we are moving forward? Because as you know, our field, our discipline did not really handle the current situation well. And it seems that the work of artists of colors specifically is very needed, especially ceramic artists in this field, very needed. How do you see this, the future of our discipline based on the current issues?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm hopeful. You know, I think that's one of the positive things that we need to keep. I'm hopeful that things would change. Mm-hmm. Just from what I've seen, I think it's changing, slowly changing. And I think, you know, like the work that both of us did with our axes, you know, we're trying to create more visibility. And now with the Color Network, creating more visibility as well. And now within SICA, try to implement some changes. You know, there's work. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. But it, you know, and I think it really depends on these organizations to see the change. You know, like I feel like we're living this movement, but some organizations are just thinking about it as a moment. Like right now, they want to activate their presence of people of color in the organizations, but that has to be long term. That can be just like this year and then forget about us the next. You know, like right now there's a lot of calls for people of color to be part of board, you know, of a board member or something, and a lot of these positions are not paid. You know, a lot of this is just work that we have to do. So I think also for some of these organizations, if they really want to do the things that they say they want to do, they have to put money on it. They have to put us in the schedule and not just kind of like create a few little opportunities for diversity within the organization, but they have to commit and have that in the forefront of the vision and mission of their statement. So it takes work. And I think holding some of these institutions accountable is one way of doing it right now, but also what can we do as individuals to create that world that we want to see, you know? And I think the smallest example is like what we're trying to do with the Color Network, or what we both try to do with our axes, and you know, it's small changes, but you know, whatever we can do, it counts. So I'm really hopeful that people do realize that it's all a system, right? It's a broken system that we're dealing with. So how do you, especially taking this pandemic as an opportunity, like not to go back to the normal thing that we were just coping with, but how can we create new ways of doing things once we are able to get back into community? You know, right now would be a good time to analyze and question those systems and see what is it that we want to see. You know, for us, what do we want to see in the ceramic field? And how can we do our part towards that change?
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Rahele, thank you. I love seeing you. I would just say with both of you on the screen, or well, Rahele just listening then, that what would you say, you know, for those organizations that haven't been including they haven't been including people of color for so long, and now here they're waking up and they're seeing that they have to bring people in, but then they're losing money right at the same time. What are some ways in which that they can collaborate with artists, and if there are small organizations who never had money but wanted to do this? I think there are different forms of compensation. Would you say that? So,
Yeah.
what would you say are some of those forms of compensation? I'm just thinking of like some nonprofits that are really small, that are struggling, but still want to give these opportunities, and maybe always have been. But you're right, now is exactly the time where we need to relook at things and be active. So how can artists do that and ask for what they need?
Yeah, I mean, I think a simple thing that a lot of organizations can do if they have a building is like share that space.
Yes.
Open the doors of your building and institution to have all their community programming. I know right now it's hard to gather as a community, but that could be a gesture. That it could be an open forum for many things. And I think, if anything, the organization gains a lot from that, because then more people know what they do and what's there, and then they will become participants of that organization or institution. So that's a simple thing, like open up the doors of your organization or building to the community, and also ask around, what else would you like to see? How can we work together? And also, it takes time to develop these relationships. It's not just like all of a sudden calling Blacks and Indigenous and people of color to be part of the organization. But how do you develop this relationship and create a long-term commitment to support this cause, and not just momentarily? And at the end, it's also a better business decision. If you reflect the community that you serve, you're gonna get more audience. You're gonna get a new wave of visitors or participants that before you were not reaching out.
I agree, totally. I also, and we have a few questions here, but I just want to say, to riffing on that, people can also take over museum Instagram, their feed, or the things that they have as far as a platform, even if they don't have a space. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cool, thanks. Okay, so we have 3 or 4 questions. I think, Matthew, did you have a question? And I'm not seeing you there. I mean, Chip, do we see Matthew there? If not, we'll go to the next question. We have Sam here then. Sam, you are here and coming on, and he has a question to you about research. Hi, Sam.
Thank you so much for your talk. This is amazing. I really appreciate everything you've said. And I just want to say that your relief prints with the, I'm not going to say it right, with those wooden presses, those were incredible as well. And I love how democratic that project was. Thank you for sharing all that. We had a relief printmaking class last week, and it was just awesome to see all that and how it can be translated into a larger project. I think some of our residents, it could really furnish some great ideas. But my question was, you led to some of this as you were like going through, and you spoke about W.E.B. Du Bois, or Dubois, I'm probably mispronouncing it. Homi Bhabha's work is something that you referenced, as well as Paulo Freire's work, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And could you speak more to like some of the, it looks like you've done some very intense research, and not just in your making, but in your reading practice, and how you intertwine those two. I think it could be very good for a lot of our listeners to think through how arts are a big research space, and I would just like to hear some more. And maybe that's me being selfish, because I was just very intrigued by how you presented this, and also how you talk about your practice and kind of the reading and thinking that happens across spaces.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. I mean, of course, there's a lot more to it than what I'm sharing here, right? Like, there's, first of all, there's a lot of mistakes that happen, right? Like in the gathering materials, experimentation phase, working with new materials, and a lot of things that just fail, like, so it's also a way of acknowledging, like, I'm not sharing like those things, but I think those are necessary to mention. I've always been wanting to do a slide presentation where I just show the things that I have messed up. I haven't done it yet, but I want to do that at some point. So I think, that is important to acknowledge that it takes time to get where we are. And even like the way where I want to get with my work, I feel like I'm not there yet, but I'm where I need to be based on my skill level and location and limitations and whatnot. So a little bit of the research, I guess, for me, it's listening to the radio, and right now we just have like so much good material everywhere, like really good podcasts, and news, and everything is available online now. And I think so it's a combination of news, and then reading some of this historical books or authors that I really relate with. And it's just trying to like combine things. I feel like a lot of the research is just done in the head. I feel like I'm constantly thinking about what I'm doing or what I want to do next. And it's just kind of like vision, picturing that. That's where it starts. And then like reading and connecting with what's going on in the world. And then you go to the studio and you just start making sometimes, and things just kind of like start coming through that process. I know it sounds a little, I don't know, like it sounds a little wishy-washy or whatnot, but that's how it works. It's like you're thinking about all these things and these ideas all day. Even when we're sleeping, we're still processing these things. And sometimes when I finish the work aesthetically, I know that it's done, but meaning-wise, it takes me some time to still gather, why I did that, or how I made that, or what does it mean to me, so sometimes it's just reacting, and if it's there, just make it, and then later come out with the concept or what is it that I was trying to convey. And I feel also, I'm not a great writer. I think it is also the job of the curators and writers to do that job. I think they can do it better than us as artists. Sometimes we have a basic understanding of what we're doing, but when it comes to writing and really digging deep into art history and what we're doing, it's a different brain, and I think that's another thing. Like, we need more writers. We need more writers that can write about all types of art, not just kind of what we're used to seeing in museums. And that's also a very difficult field. I don't know if that really answered your question, but it is just kind of like a combination of life experiences and connecting it with books and what's going on in the world. And unfortunately, there's so much material, there's so much going on in our world that there's plenty.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Sam. We now have a question from Anne, who is a part of our program. She is one of 38 of selected participants of our residency program this year. And all of our participants are outstanding. So no pressure, Anne, but question, the stage is yours here.
Thank you for the presentation. That was incredibly inspiring. I was thinking about one of the things that you said, which was that that change, something around how change sort of begins with ourselves, with working on ourselves. And I was connecting that to your transition into becoming sort of a facilitator or a creator of holding spaces. And my experience with doing that is it takes so much self-awareness to step into a leadership position, just to avoid sort of re-traumatizing people or accidentally inflicting harm. And I was wondering how you sort of transitioned into this, because another thing that stood out in your presentation is you were talking about how you are sort of, your trajectory has been around sort of like stepping into roles and learning through the process of taking on new projects. And you said, I think too, that you didn't know that you were going to become, a teacher. So I'm curious when you sort of felt like you were ready to take that role on responsibly.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think is a very thoughtful question. And I think it's one of those things, once again, that that from my own, I guess, to try to answer the question, yes, I think it starts with being open. I think is this idea of being open to the circumstances and listening. It really is about listening, a lot of listening, and being honest, and I think it's being honest and staying true to what you believe in, When I was at a different institution, I did some admission work, and that turned into community arts advocate. And I ended up going to a lot of meetings about diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I'm not a sociologist. I didn't study any of that, but I was the only one of the few brown people in the institution. And I was kind of interested in that work. And I went to a bunch of meetings and I learned a lot. And a lot of it is, it comes from that frustration of sometimes like seeing all this talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion and not that many actions. So I think I learned a lot from being part of the conversation, but I wanted to see actions, and I think, and also I was able to relate that just to my own personal experience. When I came here, I didn't know the language. I had different obstacles that, other people have even worse obstacles than what I had. And so I think, part of it is just, is that being open, listening, and also that's something that you're interested in. It takes a lot of energy to be part of all these meetings and all doing any type of work. It takes energy. So make sure you put that energy towards something that you're passionate about, something that you believe in. And I think it's also, you're also gonna find that there are gonna be places that they don't care about that. So it's also acknowledging that, and if they're not care about the work and the energy that you put in towards the cause, then maybe that's not a good place for you. And also, I think it's also recognizing that and leaving those places, or people for that matter. If you have people like that, then it's like, why?
Thank you, Anne. Thank you so much. Before I bring Quinn on, who's another participant of our program, I just want to say to those who are asking questions in the chat, please just press the camera button and you'll be in queue, and I'll just press that camera button and you'll come on. So we have here who's Quinn Hunter, who, like I said, is part of our wonderful program, and I'm really honored that she's with us. And Quinn, now we can see you. Yes, great. Would you like to ask a question of Salvador?
Yeah, so I guess my question is a little bit complex. So I guess often people of color are asking/fighting for a seat at the table, and I think that sort of narrative is like a statement that assumes that the table belongs to a dominant group, or the dominant group. And so I was wondering if you could talk about that in your relation to your practice, and how you're creating equitable spaces.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it is complicated. And it's an option, I think that's also important. If you get invited to these places, you can also say no. You don't have to do that work. In some ways, a lot of the times, we get asked to do their work, and it's good because at least they're open to that idea. But also, it's not our responsibility to educate them about all these different things that we are dealing with, or how they can do better. They can also do their work. So it's an option. It's complicated, and if you're passionate and interested in doing that work, it would be great, because that's also creating the path for newer generations to be part of the table. And maybe we might get to a point where it's not about like reaching out to people of color to be part of the table, but automatically they're part of the table, and not just in those roles of doing the diversity, equity, and inclusion work, but it's just more of a vision. It's more being part of a broader ideologies, or bringing other aspects, but you still bring your diverse perspective, but it is complicated. Sometimes I don't want to do that, but sometimes I'm like, well, if I don't do it, who's gonna do it? So, but it's an option. If you feel like, that's not for you, then don't do it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Quinn. Who has other questions that they would like to come forward? I think I saw a question here in the chat. I'll just read it from Jason. He's saying, Salvador, can you please speak more on not seeing yourself in your heroes, your professors in school, etc., and potentially some thoughts on how to navigate not seeing oneself represented?
I think for me, it just came, I didn't get that at school, so I had to look somewhere else. So for me, luckily I had a group of friends and mentors who have experienced similar things, and who went to academia for art, and that it was them. It was like having those conversations with them about my work that filled that gap, and I think now being in that position in my school, like I could see how some of the students who share similar backgrounds, they were just so happy to have someone that can talk about their work at a different level. And I mean at a different level, like in the sense that we can talk about other things than just try to dance around the idea or the questions of identity or things like that, but you go deeper. And there's a little bit more of a challenge of the work and the content and how that's delivered. That's what a real critique is, and not just avoiding the hard conversation about those things.
I think that's, though, so unusual. Like, what you're doing is great at School of the Art Institute of Chicago, but and here at Chautauqua, I think you and I spoke about this. I'm trying to fill those gaps in academia where they're hugely missing, and there's deep conversations to have them, and giving space to others tremendously as much as I can. It's going to take time, but we dove right in last year. But I want to ask you, though, the big elephant in the room is School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and I went there, very expensive. Talk about equity, right? They're extremely expensive. They're in the upper echelon of the elite that yield into the market, right? I love School of the Art Institute of Chicago for their career development. I just heard, though, they laid off a ton of people, but they have a strong endowment. So I don't know what percentage is coming off and what they're not giving. but how do you deal with the contradiction? And I think there's tons of contradictions, right? Here at Chautauqua, we have a tremendous amount of people who've been coming here for years and years and years. There's some people more privileged than others that have been coming to Chautauqua, just like in many places, right? And so then you have this contradiction of also people from different races, different economic situations, different age groups that clash. But I really believe in that clash because it's the only way that we're going to change it. So can you talk about that at School of the Art Institute of Chicago being that elite school that really people can't get in without a lot of funding if they don't have it? And those who do then accumulate a lot of debt. So what do you think?
That is complicated. That is complicated, and especially at the beginning for me, it was difficult to think about those things, or how was I navigating those things. And I think part of it was like, well, I'm getting this great opportunity to change that, and part of it is changing. It's a small, I'm just a small part of that change, but part of it is the change that the students can see, the students, it varies, a lot of international students, there is diversity within the student body. And also I think it's important for the more privileged students to see people like us as well being in these positions of sharing knowledge and providing the classes. And I think that's also a change that you don't see it right away, but maybe towards the end, once they're older or having a career in whatever field they decide to go to, they can remember some of those conversations. They can remember some of those instances where they can recognize the importance of that, of diversity and just learning from different sources. The way I navigate this situation, or this complicated situation of being in an institution that is expensive, but I teach there, the way I see it is like that also provides me with stability, financial stability as an artist, as an educator, as a citizen. But also that also gives me resources to then, for me to provide same quality of education and programming with doing the community-based work that I do with the community. And how I fund that, it could be different ways. It could be through a grant, through a fellowship, or just, sharing, what I know with workshops and things like that. So that's the only way that I can see that I can navigate that complicated situation. Of course, I'm trying to do as much as I can to create more opportunities for students there as I can, but right now we're all going through a very difficult situation. It is a lot of things are gonna be dealing with a lot of just difficult situations with funding and layoffs and things like that. So in a way, I'm fortunate that I'm not in that position, but at the same time, I hope that the people who are in this position think about this as a bigger picture and seeing how they can create better systems for institutions to be more sustainable and equitable. So I guess to answer your question, is like the way I see it is it's navigating those two worlds, like getting stability, but also continuing with the shared knowledge through other projects that gets funded by my work there as a professor.
Yeah, I think it makes total sense. And it's a great learning lesson for others too, because I know a lot of faculty don't do what you do. where even if they get the position, they don't work within to resist the institution, whereas there should be that openness. And for anyone who believes in giving opportunities to others who haven't had those opportunities, we need to be able to say that in these premier institutions. And I'm really grateful that you're there doing that work, as well as all the community work that you do. So last call for the last question. Does anybody have any? I think we're concluding here. Thank you. I would just say how touched I am by you and how grateful I am that you were able to share your knowledge with us today in such a lovely, as I said, lovely, unapologetic, sincere, honest, truthful. And as I said, I'm going to welcome you back to Chautauqua next year. And I'm hoping that people see this as a warm up to seeing you in person. And I just wish you all the best and great safety in this pandemic. And if there's anything we can do for you here, we are available. Of course, you know that I'm essentially at your will and call at any time. But this presentation was incredibly moving, and I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for the invitation, and I'm looking forward to maybe seeing you guys over there sometime.
Whenever. Whenever.
Yeah.
I hope, and I'll of course stay in touch with you, and I will be sending you a letter right after this.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm sending you all my love, and thank you so much.
Likewise.
And thanks to everyone who's come. And can we have that last slide to show that we have Caleb Lindsay coming next week, who is one of our mentors, who's originally from Florida, is now a Tulsa Artist Fellowship Fellow, who's living in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he's going to be next. And I just can't thank Salvador enough in going to our next person, which is Caleb, part of our team. And thank you again. Thanks, everyone. And I think we're concluding with a video that we're supposed to see right after this. This is a cool video. Let's see. The virtual porch, which we're a part of. And we are a nonprofit organization. So if you feel that you want to contribute in some way, I mean, give me a shout out, at least give me a call and give me your ideas, anything that you'd like, and come back to the virtual porch. So until next week, I hope you have a great week, and we'll see you soon in Salvador. Thank you again. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.